The 2026 World Cup is coming up in just a few days, and I have been feeling the hype for at least the last year. The World Cup only comes around once every 4 years, so it feels like a really big deal every time it hits the calendar. It's a beautiful thing to see people from all over the world come together for our common love of football. Now, I live in the United States, and to say the least, we have a complicated history with football, or as we call it here in the States, soccer. Soccer has never been the most popular sport here in the States, so when it comes to the World Cup in the 20th century, most people would root for their nation of origin. And this is because the United States just didn't take the sport as seriously as other nations around the globe. And this translated over to the 21st century as well, even as the US national team started to progress in its abilities. And that's how you end up with someone like me, who was born and raised in the United States, but still decides to root for their nation of origin, in this case, Mexico for me. And that's because the soccer teams that I grew up watching weren't the Major League Soccer teams here in the US. I was watching Liga MX, and I was watching America, I was watching Chivas, I was watching Tigres, Pumas, Cruz Azul. These were the teams that I was familiar with. These were the players that I was familiar with. I've spent my entire life identifying with my Mexican heritage, but also identifying as an American. And in the last year, I had to face up to a challenge that so many immigrants and children of immigrants have to face within their lifetimes. And that challenge is struggling to keep up with your home culture and your heritage while you're living in this melting pot of cultures that is the United States. I've lived in the United States my entire life. I was born and raised here, and it's a beautiful mix of so many different cultures all in one. But as I got older, I felt the diaspora weighing down on me. I felt like I was losing a big part of my Mexican heritage because I wasn't making enough effort to stay active with the culture and deepen my understanding of this culture and my heritage. And over the last couple of years, I have made that effort to make sure that that wouldn't continue. I wanted to feel a deeper connection with my culture, even if I was disconnected from the land itself. Yo soy mexicano, soy orgulloso de ser mexicano, pero no es fácil ser mexicano y americano al mismo tiempo. So here's what I've been up to reconnect with my culture.
Siempre he dicho las palabras se las lleva el viento.
About halfway into the production of this video, I decided I needed to cut my hair because I just had one too many bad hair days, and I feel like I lost a pound of weight off of my head. And don't worry, what I'm wearing is not Chivas. This is Indiana. You wouldn't catch me wearing Chivas, I promise you. Americanistas over here, please don't hate me for that too. Okay, so I grew up in a mostly English-speaking nation that promotes assimilation. And when you're not constantly surrounded by community that you share a culture with, it's easy to lose that heritage and feel it slipping through your fingers. And when I came to that realization, it made me want to connect to my heritage that much more. A common criticism of Chicanos is that their Spanish can often feel broken because they didn't speak it growing up as a child, they never learned it growing up as a child, or they didn't practice it enough as a child for those skills to stay sharp. And I fall into that second boat. When I finished my undergrad and had time to reflect on what I wanted out of life, I realized how disconnected I had gotten from my Mexican culture while I was so focused on graduating. Not to say I forgot where I came from, don't get it twisted, don't worry. My Spanish was always good enough to have a conversation with my family and at my fast food job where I could talk to my fellow Spanish speakers so our coworkers wouldn't understand us, you know what I'm saying? But I knew I needed to do more if I wanted to keep my Spanish speaking skills from leaving me as I got older. So I decided to practice my Spanish the same way I learned to speak English as a child. I started playing Pokemon in Spanish, and I was reading the lines out loud. And as I played a little bit more and more, I was reading the sentences faster and faster, and I wasn't stuttering the way I was when I first started the game. I made sure to talk to every single one of the NPCs in that game. I was seeing common phrases over and over again, and soon enough, I didn't have to enunciate every other word and sound it out. But language is more than just reading. You have to hear the language, and you have to speak the language. And one of my absolute favorite ways to do that is through music. You guys know through watching this channel already, I love music. And Spanish music gives you so many different options for culture and genre and sound. You can't go wrong. La Quinta Estación, Rosalía, Bad Bunny, these guys have all played a big role in me practicing my Spanish over and over again. It also helps me learn a little bit about different dialects and different accents that you might not hear just by living in the United States. As a kid, I also watching MTV3. I don't know if you guys remember that or if that's even still around, but I remember watching music videos of Belinda and Belanova on TV, and all of a sudden, I'm listening to that music again just like I'm a little kid, and it just brings back good memories memories while also helping me reconnect with the culture that I thought I was losing. Los deportes son un pedazo grande de la cultura. Y con el mundial que viene esta semana, no puedo parar de platicar de fútbol. I've always been familiar with soccer. It's practically impossible to be Mexican and not be a little familiar with soccer. And while I played and watched the sport as a little kid, it didn't stick with me as much as something like basketball did. And maybe I've been infected with that World Cup fever, but I haven't been able to stop talking about soccer over the last year. And watching some fútbol en español really helps you understand the language a lot better, because these announcers, they speak fast. They speak so fast that sometimes it doesn't even sound like they're speaking a language. They speak like this, but imagine it in Spanish. It's hard to understand. But if you can understand that and you can interpret that at the speed that they're speaking, then you'll be able to understand Spanish in no time. Truly. Who says watching TV can't be educational? Because that's one of the best ways that I've been connecting to the culture, by watching two things in particular. Number one, lucha libre. I've been watching a lot of Consejo Mundial de Lucha Libre, Super Viernes, or Viernes Espectacular as they say in Mexico, and I've been watching a lot of that with the Spanish commentary turned on. And hearing these announcers say the names of the wrestlers, the names of the moves that they're performing, as well as their thoughts on the match, hearing them speak these words out loud, words that maybe I haven't heard before, but because I know what wrestling moves are, and I know what these things are called in English, it helps me connect the two. It's translating real time in my head, and it builds my vocabulary. Plus, watching Místico while the whole crowd sings Me Muero by La Quinta Estación. Beautiful, beautiful. How can you not love that? Místico is an icon, bro, and he is probably the most iconic living wrestler alive. Argue with your mama. I was also keeping up with Liga MX, and that is the biggest soccer league in Mexico, and I've been following America because even as a little kid, I remember liking America. Shout out Memo Ochoa. You walk around any city in Mexico, or you walk around any city populated by Mexican people here in the United States, and give it a couple of minutes and you'll see a Chivas jersey, an America jersey, a Cruz Azul jersey, a Pumas jersey. You'll see something. You'll see some Mexican football hanging around all over the area because it's a big part of our culture. And then we bring it back to basics. We're reading short stories in Spanish. We're reading small books in Spanish. We're practicing Spanish in any way possible. I changed the language. I can't find my phone, but I changed the language on my phone to Spanish just to be exposed to it more often. That exposure makes a huge difference. I'm talking to my friends in Spanish. I'm talking to my family more often. And honestly, I found that the conversations that I've had with my family since I started practicing my Spanish and connecting with my culture a little bit more again have been more nuanced, have been more complex and deep. And I appreciate that because I feel like that was something that was lacking within my teenage years. None of these things are new. These are all things that we've been doing since we were kids. This is how we learn any language. This is how we all learn our first language. It's just by being exposed to it over and over again. And you don't even realize you're learning it half the time. It just happens. La verdad es que me pongo un poquito nervioso cuando hablo en español, especialmente cuando es en público o cuando estoy hablando por la internet. Yo tengo un acento y es bien obvio que soy americano y que tengo un acento de un americano. Pero si no luchas con esa vergüenza, nunca te vas a mejorar. Y yo me quiero mejorar. Yo quiero conectar con mi cultura. Yo quiero conectar con mi idioma, con mi lenguaje. Yo quiero conectar con los mexicanos. Y eso es algo que nunca me va a dar vergüenza. For the longest time, I felt like it was the sole responsibility of parents to make sure that they were passing on their culture to their children, and it is a big part of it. But as I got older, I realized that if I wanted to keep in touch with my heritage, that was on me. That was my responsibility. It was too late to practice my Spanish as a kid. I'm grown now. It's not like I could travel back in time and force myself to speak Spanish more often. I had to start speaking Spanish on my own terms as an adult, and I also had to be willing to accept that I might look silly or sound silly in some scenarios because my Spanish is far from perfect. But honestly, ever since I started posting videos on the internet, I've kind of learned to deal with being a little embarrassed every now and then. Lo que importa es que estoy practicando y así me voy a mejorar con mi español. And practicing the language was a great excuse to double down on my culture. Getting to listen to music in Spanish, watching TV in Spanish, playing games in Spanish, reading in Spanish, talking to other people in Spanish. I was already doing the things that I enjoy doing, but with a little bit more emphasis on the language that I wanted to practice. And this allowed me to build my vocabulary at the same time that I was enjoying all the cool stuff that made me want to practice the language in the first place. It was a beautiful paradox. I've still got a long road to go. And look, a lot of native Mexicans might even laugh at a Mexican American wanting to reconnect with this culture so much when he lives in the United States. When I look in the mirror and I see my handsome little face, I don't just see a Mexican, I don't just see an American, I see a Mexican-American man. I'm both. And I want to feel connected to both cultures. But that can't happen if I don't try to build this connection. And I'm still very far from where I want to be, but I am much, much closer than I was when I started. And that's a major win in my book.